Hi, my name is Lee Aase. I'm the director of the Mayo Clinic Social Media Network, and glad to welcome you to our October webinar featuring Dr. Daniel Cabrera, who's an emergency medicine physician here at Mayo Clinic. He also has been a champion of including digital scholarship or social media related scholarship as part of the process for academic advancement. Earlier this year, the Mayo Clinic committee that oversees these things, and Dr. Cabrera will talk much more eloquently about what that committee is, approved, including this on the grid for academic promotion. And as Dr. Cabrera did some communication about that online, we received a lot of interest about it. And we also had him follow up with a blog post, and we thought this would be a great opportunity for him to be able to share what he's been working on and what Mayo's philosophy has been on this, and also a related paper on which he was the lead author that sort of outlines a potential framework for doing this and why it's important. So we're glad to welcome Dr. Cabrera. He has been involved with our Mayo Clinic social media network, was also involved in our Hootsuite co-developed course, our academic course on for CME credit. The Social for Basics certificate from Mayo Clinic and Hootsuite. So he was one of the physician reviewers as part of that. With that, I just turn it over to Dr. Cabrera, and I know you're going to enjoy what he has to share with you today.
Thank you, Lee. So I'm really happy to be here today. This is something that has been part of my academic life for the last 2 or 3 years, and something that I really think is important. So why we're doing this? About 3 or 4 years ago, I realized how important social media education is, and how the importance of social media education will be for the future. And I started doing some social media education, and some of my best friends, who are also emergency physicians and educators, were a little bit hesitant to be part of this, because the main problem that they have is, what is the quality of this? This is not really good quality education. And second and foremost, which is important, is they get no credit. They got no academic currency of doing social media education. So I realized that one of the most important steps to advance social media education will be a way to give educators and teachers currency, academic currency for digital scholarship. So I focused in the last 2 or 3 years along Lee and Farris Timimi and some other people in the clinic to develop these guidelines and to develop this framework about how to use digital scholarship and social media for career promotion, which is a way to provide academic currency. I'm going to talk about a few things. One is why we should do this. Also going to touch on what are the critiques about digital scholarship. And at the end, I'm going to give you like a basic framework about digital scholarship and social media education and how to get academic currency from it. Most of the things I'm going to mention right now, you can have this link, which is from one of my websites. It has a collection of good papers and good resources about how to use social media for academic promotion. So why do this? I think the most important thing as academicians, as health professions academics, is we have a social contract. And we have a social contract with our learners, and we have a social contract with society. And what is this contract? Number one is we need to create science from the bench, from basic science to clinical science and to implementation science. And that is relatively clear for all of us. Number two is we need to treat our patients. It's our duty to do the best for our patients and what is in their best interest. Number three is we need to teach, and we need to teach other health professionals, and we need to teach our patients. And fourth, that sometimes we forget, is we need to influence policy and influence general population opinion. We need to occupy spaces. And I think that's one of the critiques that we have in the last 25 years. Academicians and health policy experts have failed to occupy the spaces that the people is using. 3,000 years ago in Greece, it was the agora. 500 years ago, it was the salon. 25 years ago was regular media, but right now it's social media. And we need to occupy the spaces, because if we don't occupy the spaces, somebody else is gonna occupy it for us. So I think it's a duty for academicians to use the space of social media. One thing that is also very important is, and I think is key, is social media is a great tool to expedite knowledge translation. We all hear these critiques about how slow the transition from basic science to clinical practice and implementation is. And social media has all the attributes necessary to expedite this process. We can increase awareness, we can increase dissemination, we can increase reinforcement loops. And there's multiple papers right now, and you can check in the website about how social media is so powerful to increase the speed of knowledge translation. And this is a kind of funny anecdote. About a month ago, I was giving a similar lecture to a crowd of clinicians mostly. And one of the critiques about this concept of social media education, social media science, and free open access science and education is that now knowledge translation is too fast, and people can't catch up with the speed of knowledge translation. So I think we're living in, and for people who's old enough to remember, we always live in this pendulum thing that science swings one way each other. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, knowledge translation was too fast, and I think we're starting to start to feel that people are complaining that knowledge translation is too fast right now. So I think that is important thing to consider as academicians. This is, very important for me and very close to my heart. All the paradigms about open access education, open access data, and open access science. And many of you are probably aware of these two big examples about open architecture. 25 years ago, I think I was at the end of high school, and Microsoft came up with the idea of releasing Encarta, and was this great thing, like a digital equivalent of the Britannic Encyclopedia. And everybody was like raging about, now with 2 CD-ROMs, you can get all the Britannic Encyclopedia in your computer. It was great. It was kind of strange because you have one CD for the index, and then you need to put the second CD to actually get the content. But, we're talking about early 90s, so it's okay. And it was Microsoft, at that time, the largest corporation in the world, putting all their weight behind this idea. And just a few years later, this ragtag group came up with the idea of, like, why don't we do an open encyclopedia? Like, everybody can, write an article, and the crowd will provide post-publication peer review, and they will improve the article, and they can write whatever they think is important, not only what a small group of academicians is important. So if we go back 25 years ago and ask you, which one do you think will survive? This Encarta, backed up by Microsoft, or this website, which like 8 people, they do it for fun? 25 years later is the open access paradigm that remains. And the second example is, many of you know Linux, and probably all of you use Linux in everyday basis, because even if you don't see it or don't know it, most of your mobile operative systems are based on Linux architecture. So even if you don't know it, you are running Linux in your devices. Then what is Linux? Again, I'm going to put Microsoft as example again, and forgive me, Microsoft. But Microsoft has this great OS, which is Windows, which I like a lot, but it's closed. So only Microsoft can change it, improve it, and modify it. And Linus Torvalds, about mid-90s, came up with the idea of, why don't we create an OS, an operative system that is open? So everybody can use it, everybody can modify it, everybody can improve it, as long as open and free for the next generation. So the paradigm of open access. And again, Linux, if I'm not wrong, is probably more than 80% of all the market of operative systems right now. So I call that success. Moving into what we do, into academia, the paradigm of open access publication and open access science. And probably all of you are aware of this idea of publishing papers, open access. So you don't have to pay, you don't have to be behind the paywall to access the paper. And that's great. Many good journals are right now publishing as open access, and many of the premier journals allow you to publish open access for a fee for the author. And also they provide open access to some low and middle income countries, which is a great thing. But the next step in open science is be actually doing open science. When you publish something, it's the idea that you publish all your data in a raw format. So people can look at that without the filter that you provide. And they may reanalyze the data and may find things that you didn't find because you didn't think about it, or because they have a better idea, or they have better tools to analyze the data. So that is the next step. You publish your results, but you publish all your data, and people can access to that. And this being probably, for people who follow this idea, they know about the 2 editorials last year about New England, the back and forth about it was a good idea to provide this open data to researchers. I'm not going to go into details because it gets a little bit complicated, but it's something to keep an eye on. And that's probably the future of science right now. And something that is particularly close to my heart is the free open access medical education movement. This is a group about 55 to 60,000 people around the world who has this crazy idea of creating medical knowledge and education tools and learning tools free and open for the world. And these are people all over the world, mostly US and Europe and Australia. There's some groups in Africa. There's some groups in Latin America and Asia. But they create all these wonderful resources for people around the world to access them for free. Because what happened here at Mayo, I'm very fortunate that I can open any computer and have access to any sort of knowledge that I need. But if you're in a small village in sub-Saharan Africa, or you're in the Andes with no access to big libraries, where do you get your knowledge? And this gentleman that is in the picture, Mike Cadogan, came out a few years ago with this idea of how obscene was to keep knowledge behind walls. And we, as academicians, it's our goal to spread this knowledge. So now we have a 55, 60,000 strong community around the world, creating cutting-edge, premier knowledge to use it for free. This is amazing. And they do it because they're passionate about that. They get no financial incentives. They just love to do it. They just love to improve healthcare around the world. So these are the good things. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to talk about what people may think are the bad things. First, and as I started before, the main obstacle, the main challenge, the main barrier for digital scholarship and for social media scholarship is probably the lack of a token, the lack of currency, the lack of a reward. Because when you publish a paper, or even now when you are an excellent teacher and you have your educator's portfolio, or when you're a fantastic clinician and you have your RVUs or your productivity metrics ready to show, you have some currency, you have some tokens. But if you're going to do this in social media, first, most academic institutions, and I'm fortunate Mayo is not one of them, but most academic institutions don't recognize this as something valuable, as something with merit. And if they don't do that, they will not reward your time, they will not reward your impact, they will not reward your work. So that was the main barrier that we have a few years ago. There was no currency. Where is this, what is for me if I do digital scholarship? I can answer that a few ways. What is there is like you can do a lot of good. And it's really, really fulfilling when you see that something you created is used around the world. But now, with this framework that we're proposing, and with this slowly but solid recognition among institutions that this is meritful, I think we're getting currency. We're getting a reward system. And which is similar, but not exactly the same is, so where's the impact of my work? And this is kind of a strange question because I have very good friends that, ask me, I'm going to create this, I'm going to put a lot of hours writing this great content and trying to teach people around the world on social media, but where's the impact of this? And it's strange because when you publish a paper, you only have one metric of impact, which is the number of your citations. But if you do something in social media, the amount of metrics and the amount of the ways to measure your impact, there are hundreds of them. The amount of followers you get, the amount of page views that your blog post may get, the amount of distribution that your blog post or your content may get, the views, people who contact you in real time. And now we're going to talk about that in a second. There's some metrics to measure this. So you can show metrics, you can show impact using digital scholarship way easier than traditional scholarship. So I still get this question, but it still surprises me that people don't see the strength of social media as a way to provide robust analytics.
Well, it's very much like traditional advertising or other communications where people accept what's always been and it's sort of grandfathered in, but then the new thing has to justify itself when in reality anything digital is much more measurable than the non-digital.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. There's a way to put it. Anything digital is way more measurable than something that is non-digital. I'm going to steal that. Yeah,
right. Very good. It's yours.
And this is for metrics. This is something called altmetrics. And I'm going to clarify something. Altmetrics with lowercase a is the concept. And Altmetrics with uppercase A, with capital A, is the company behind the concept. But let me talk about the concept first. As I said before, the most important metric in academic medicine and academia in general is the impact index score, which is a proprietary score developed by Thomson Reuters. And it was developed 50 years ago with the idea of telling the librarians what journals were popular and what journals they should subscribe to. It was never intended to be a surrogate or a marker of quality or impact. But, you know, the same thing with the Social Security number. It was never a way to identification, but it became a way to assess for impact. And there's multiple critiques about the impact score. One is journal-based and it's not article-based. So you may publish a fantastic article in a bad journal, then your article is bad. And you may publish a horrible paper in a great journal, then your article is great, which makes no sense. And all of you probably are aware of ways to manipulate and ways to game your impact score. So it's not a great way to do it. So about 10 years ago, 5 years ago, this group from basic researchers developed this concept that more important than the citation score was the impact in real life. And they realized that the times that the article is mentioned in the media, the times an article is mentioned in social media, the times an article is page viewed, downloaded, or archived in a reference manager, it was probably a better way to assess impact than actually the impact score. So they developed this concept of altmetrics. Some people also call it cyber bibliometrics. And they developed after this company, which is called Altmetrics. There's a few more right now. The other big company doing this Altmetrics is called PlumX. And basically what we're trying to do is track the impact, track the attention of your the work in real life. And how they do that? News media mentions, or traditional media mentions, social media mentions, citations, and reference manager software. And here's an example for one of the papers at our department. Very successful paper in terms of impact. And we created a campaign about this paper a year ago, 2 years ago, trying to make it more impactful and disseminate the information in a more active way. And you can see that it has 173 tweets, and it was mentioned in 6 blogs and 5 Facebook pages, and it's been referenced many times. So this is a way that you can see that your work is impactful. So you need to understand there's new metrics to assess your work. And you need to be proactive about impacting those metrics. And some of you probably know about the Kardashian index, which is this dichotomy of this imbalance between your regular traditional metrics, your impact score, versus your social media impact, which is followers in Twitter and Facebook and those type of metrics. So what the Kardashian index is showing 2 things. Traditional establishment is a little bit unease with people who may be not as important in traditional media and very important in social media. And that's okay, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. We all know that some people is better playing one sport than other sport, or some people in the same sport is better playing defense than offensive. So the same thing with academics. Some people may be extremely good in traditional metrics. They publish like crazy, but they have very little impact in real life. And the other way around, people may have a much more impact in social media in real life, but less impact scientifically. As everything in life, you need to reach some sort of middle point. And you can be impactful in both worlds. You can be impactful in the world of media, in the world of social media, and in the world of traditional metrics. I think that's important too, and we tend to forget, is the importance of creating communities. When we publish in traditional media, when we do traditional science, the only people that we impact is the people who read our papers. And there's famous paper that may or may not be true, but this famous paper that says that about 75% of papers are only read by the authors, the reviewers, and the publishers. And the rest of the papers are not read by anybody else. So we only impact our peers. With social media, we can impact all our communities. And this is important. It's the concept of creating a community of practice. You as an academician can't be playing solo. You need to play with your patients. You need to work with your patients. You need to work with other healthcare providers. You need to work with your media people and create a community and interact with the knowledge that you are working around. Emergency medicine in my case, or advocacy of vaccines, and do an impact in the world. And this was one of the other critiques I had when I started doing this. That most people told me that, whatever you do on social media doesn't have a real impact in life. And we are fortunate to show about last year, and actually published this paper this year, that actually if you organize in Twitter around a certain knowledge or domain, you can actually impact real life. And we show in this paper that the FOMED movement, the one I mentioned before, is able to organize in social media, is able to organize in Twitter, and have real life impact. So I think that is a game changer in terms of showing that we do real things, and it's not just trolling in the internet.
Well, what kind of impact were you able to show in this paper?
For example, we showed that there's a lot of knowledge dissemination, and there was a lot of practice changes based on this knowledge dissemination.
Okay.
So we're able to show that.
Okay.
And kudos to Demian Rowland and Jesse Spur, some of my co-authors, for all the work that they did here. The major critique also is the quality of what is published in social media. And I totally understand there's terrible things published in social media, and there's garbage in social media. But also there's terrible things published in traditional media, and there's garbage in traditional journals. We all know about these hundreds of papers that are retracted every day. And if you don't do it, I will recommend to follow the Retraction Watch blog, which is a great blog that tracks every single retraction in major journals. And it's appalling. Some of the retractions are just because they did some bona fide analytics mistake, but some of the retractions are like completely almost negligent. So I agree, garbage in social media, but garbage in traditional media, garbage in traditional journals. And this is the concept that you can't blame the messenger because of the message. There's great things in social media, and there are great things in traditional media, in traditional science. And you need to understand that what is important is the knowledge, is the content, and not necessarily the media. I think the two ways to assess the quality of social media academics and social media scholarship and digital scholarship is following two things, and both of them from our Canadian neighbors up north. This is a paper by Jonathan Sherbino, who is probably the cornerstone paper about how to assess social media scholarship. And this is a great paper, and there's a free access version in the website I showed you at the beginning, so I'm not going to go through the details. But surprisingly, what the paper says is the same tools that we can use for traditional science, we can use for social media science. And there's many ways to assess for the quality, for the fitness of education tools and social media tools in education. And this is something that we need to keep an eye on. This is called the metric study, and it's actually multiple studies at the same time, also from a Canadian group led by Teresa Chan and Brent Thoma. What they're trying to do is develop a metric, an index, to tell you if what is published in social media is good quality or bad quality, which will make your life easier as a consumer of knowledge. Because if you go to any website and you see this badge there, and the index says that it's probably good quality, you know you can trust this is good quality. So something to keep an eye on. This, my understanding is the results of the study are not out yet, but everybody interested in the topic should keep an eye on the metric study. So I mentioned why we should do this, why not, and now we're gonna mention basically how to do it. And I'm gonna briefly mention about our paper that we published in August. My main message is you need to get out there and conquer the space. You need to do it. And why you need to do it? Because if you don't do it, you run the risk of becoming irrelevant. And I'm going to show you two tweets. For the people in the audience who doesn't know this website, this is Life in the Fast Lane. Very cheesy title, but there's a history behind that. It was the name of an Australian soap opera some years ago. So for some reason, they decided to use that name. And this blog is a medical blog run from Australia. Mike Cadogan and Chris Nixon are the two main people of this blog. And this is non-for-profit. The core team is about 10 people. And they do this because they're just passionate about teaching medicine. And take a look at these two tweets. Life in the Fast Lane has more page views than New England Journal of Medicine. This is amazing. So this ragtag blog from Sydney, Australia, run by 10 people, non-for-profit, has more page views than New England Journal of Medicine. That's amazing. And a recent stat from last week, actually, if you take all the JAMA network traffic, Life in the Fast Lane has 30% more traffic than the JAMA network. Again, we're talking about gigantic institutions, New England and JAMA, and this very small blog has more page views. If you don't get into this boat, you're running the risk of becoming irrelevant in the present or in the future. So you have to do it. So this is our paper. Again, there's a free open access version in the website I showed you at the beginning. And the three things that are important in our paper are, I'm going to start with the most important thing, actually. The most important thing in our paper is you need to do this professionally. You need to do this with a game, an end game in mind. You need to do this with a goal. And what the goal is, you need to pick a niche, be professional about it. You need to treat this as the same way you treat any sort of a scholarship. So you need to dedicate time, you need to have a clear goal, and you need to work for it. This is not for like amateur academics. This is like a serious game. So you need three components in any sort of academic promotion in social media. Number one, the academic institutions need to develop clear guidelines in terms of what they expect from the academicians, what the priorities for the academic center are, and how they're going to reward this. And what I'm trying to say is the following. A big academic center probably has interest in advancing basic research, education, and practice. But a tiny medical center may only have interest in advancing patients' outreach or advocacy. And it's okay. Every center will have different priorities, but they need to be explicit. Once they're explicit, the academic center need to provide rules of engagement. One more time, we're fortunate here that for probably 10 years, we had our social media policies that govern the behavior of Mayo employees. So, but the academic center need to have that clear too. And the last thing is academic centers and the promotions committee of academic centers need to provide a clear impact score, what they want to reward and what they're not going to reward, and how they're going to review it and how they're not going to review it. That needs to be crystal clear. For the academicians that they want to use this, they need to create portfolios. And the portfolios are basically the same concept that the education portfolios have. You need to have a clear philosophy. In this case, I'm an emergency physician, and my niche will be healthcare providers. And what I'm going to do with them is teaching emergency medicine. But you may say, I'm a pediatrician, and my niche is breastfeeding. And my niche group will be to improve breastfeeding in underserved communities. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and my niche is spine surgery. And my objective is to improve the outcomes of spine surgery. Therefore, I'm going to reach patients, just to tell them who needs surgery, who doesn't need surgery, and providers, telling them how to pick better surgical candidates, and so forth. So you need to be clear, and you need to choose a niche, and choose now a platform. Nobody has the time and the resources to attack all platforms. Some people will, for example, choose YouTube, and they will create YouTube videos. I choose to work in Twitter mostly, and I create conversations in Twitter, and I create communities in Twitter. Somebody will choose to have a blog. For example, we had two examples in Mayo, Mike Joyner and Bobby Pritt, who had very important blogs about human performance in the case of Mike Joyner and parasitology in the case of Bobby Pritt. You may choose to run a community. You may be a neurologist who's interested in multiple sclerosis, and you may want to be the administrator of a large community of patients with multiple sclerosis, when you can help with questions, you can help, guiding research and guiding patient advocacy. So you need to choose a niche, you need to choose a platform. And when you have that, you're going to create a bunch of products. You're going to create blog posts, you're going to create this community, you may create these videos. And the great thing about social media is you have the ability to have very, very granular analytics. So when you apply for academic promotion, you need to come up with the analytics of your products. So my YouTube videos have 1 million visits per year, and they have had 10 million visits in the last 10 years. Or my community is 50,000 big strong, and my community created this food drive or this research endowment, or my blog post have this so many page views and downloads. So you need to come with metrics. And with those things, which is your niche, your platform, your metrics, you can create a very believable portfolio and philosophy of teaching. And with that, the same way that you have your RVUs, the same way that you have your papers, you now have a social media portfolio. And with the social media portfolio, you can progress in your academic career. One more time, here's some resources.
All right. Well, great. Thanks, Dr. Cabrera. This has been fantastic. It's been a great overview. And I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions, please do put them in the box to your right, and we'll get to as many of these as we can. So go ahead and put in those questions. We've had a few come in already, and we'll get to those. But one of the things I'd like you to do is maybe step back and talk about this 2-3 year process that you went through at Mayo Clinic to get this recognized and get that grid established here.
I have to be I'm very fortunate because our promotions committee, our academic promotion committee was very open to the idea. A little bit before that, in the last 10 years, we have seen that promotion committee not only rewards the classic 3 shields, research, practice, and education. We have seen that starting in the last 15 years, new things such as innovation, startups, patents, informatics are being rewarded. So when I saw some of those signs that innovation and startups were rewarded in academic centers, I just thought, well, if they're rewarding that, they're probably open to reward other things. So we have a few meetings with Dr. Rob Spinner, which is one of our co-authors in the paper, and he was very open to the idea. But rightly so also, he wanted to have like a clear framework. And what we did, and took some time, is to try to figure out there was any other framework that was able to be used.
Someplace else.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
First, we looked into social media frameworks and other institutions, and we didn't find much. I think we are the first ones to have a framework. I'm aware of some institutions that consider social media and academic promotion, and they have promoted academicians based on the social media activity. But my understanding is they didn't have a clear framework. Because we couldn't find a framework in social media, we started looking in frameworks somewhere else. And being a previous associate program director, I was familiar with the educator's portfolio. So we adopted that. Took a little bit of tweaking to change the concept behind this portfolio into a social media portfolio. Took some feedback from many smart people. And for the last year, we were able to basically tweak it to something that is functional.
Okay, great. Yeah, we will, someone's asking, please provide Dr. Cabrera's URL in the comments. We'll get that in there for sure. So this is kind of a related question to what I just asked, but how do you advise getting your promotions committee to start considering this in a traditional academic institution? You came into a group that was pretty interested in that already, right?
So, I foresee this like my slides about Godzilla. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Either happen now or in the future. So I'm privy to some of my colleagues trying to push this through their academic centers. And my main recommendation will be, let me go back to that in 3 years ago. If 3 years ago you went to your promotion committee with this crazy idea of having social media for academic promotion, there was no way that they're going to get that because there was nothing published about it. Right. So there will be 1 or 2 academicians just with this crazy idea. Now I'm aware about at least 2 or 3 papers besides mine who are making the making the case for utilizing social media and academic promotion. And I'm pretty sure that all academic centers have some social media activity, and they start to recognize how important that is. So now you can go to your academic center, armored with these papers that showing like, there's the Mayo Clinic is doing it. Right. So if Mayo Clinic is doing it, why are we not?
And that's really what has happened with our Mayo Clinic social media network too. I mean, when we set this up in 2010, the basic idea was if we can help pave the way a little bit by sharing what we're developing for our own staff with colleagues externally, then that helps us all be better together. So
absolutely.
Good. Cool. Another one we have, how common is it for institutions promotions committee to place any value on social media metrics? Maybe kind of
I would say the short answer is probably not common. It's becoming more common. I'm aware of about 3 American institutions putting weight in social media, and I'm aware about at least 2 academicians being promoted mostly in social media. It's still uncommon.
Okay. Someone here is asking something you sort of referred to, I think, said, isn't it true that most the people who post and the friends are the ones most viewing like papers published? So in essence, it's your friends on Facebook and your friends and followers on Twitter are the ones that are doing the views. And so how is that really different? I mean, how is that really different from the fact that maybe 75% of papers are read by the reviewers and that's it?
Well, I hope that my friends and family are reading the stuff I put in Facebook or in Twitter. That's a low starting level. Yeah. But I can tell you from my experience, from the things we publish in the EM blog, which is the social media arm of the Department of Emergency Medicine, and my personal publications, of course, there's some, friends and family, the first circle of friend of family. Then there's an extended circle, which I call friends. There's probably about thousands of people that I think are my friends in social media that I actually don't know. And they also help reading this. Right. But there's a next circle of hundreds of thousands of people that they have access to our publications. And I can tell you from the EM blog, about 50% of the traffic comes outside the United States. Okay. So I can tell you those not are my friends. I probably never, talk to them. Right. So there's a micro environment of, the close people that will, sure, access to your content. But the vast majority is like truly a network of people around the world.
And when somebody just put in here something, not if hashtags are properly used, hashtags draw on all people, to those posts if they're interested in that topic.
That's the key. The hashtag is the way to signal the community that you're publishing something.
Okay. Someone asking here, what are some of the academic sites that are allowing open access, and how do you start this kind of site?
So in terms of the traditional websites that allow open access, I think the most important mention right now is all the BMJ publishing company. So BMJ first has this completely open journal, which is the BMJ Open, which is open. And BMJ also offers the opportunity to publish your papers, open access, with some fee. There's a very important journals that are completely open. For example, PLOS One, or all the PLOS publishing group.
So PLOS.
PLOS, right? Yeah, yep, PLOS.
Yep.
PLOS. I'm going to mention 2 important websites. There's a website called the Winover, and there's a website called FT1000 Research, which are, one is American, one is British, and they publish research, open access, almost for free. They have a nominal publication fee about $20 just to cover some website cost, where you can publish science, open access, with open peer review, which is an entire topic that we don't have enough time to discuss right now.
Another webinar later, right?
Another webinar. Open post-publication peer review. And they have a very successful run so far. So I will tell people to keep an eye on those 2 websites, the Winover and FT1000 Research.
Okay, great. Someone asking here, you personally, how has social media activity contributed to advancements in your medical career?
Oh, this is like personal thing, but I'm applying for an associate professor in the next few weeks. And I think I would say 50% of all my papers are related or because social media. And 75% of all my academic work in the last 3 or 4 years is because or about social media. So my personal answer has been quite impactful, actually critically impactful.
Okay, great. So in your opinion at Mayo Clinic, what evidence short of a Nobel Prize would convince academic promotion rank if one were to focus solely on social media scholarship as metrics? The way social media is perceived is that the bar to publish is low and not fully thought through.
Actually, it's a great question. And I think only a Nobel Prize will do that. And I think it's the wrong approach. You can't do only social media education. It's like everything in life. If you don't have a strict credit with scientists and with traditional academicians, it's really difficult to have impact on alternative media. So I will not advise anybody to do nothing but social media. They need to have their feet in both sides. They need to have street credit in traditional science or traditional media, and they need to have street credit in alternative media and alternative science. It's a bad term, not alternative science, alternative publications of science.
Yeah. So somebody else asking, many large academic institutions have their own communications and social media programs, which can often be bureaucratic. Sounds like you encourage physicians to go at social media independently. How do you view these two entities, communications department versus individuals working together?
I don't think at any point I said going independently.
No.
And actually, for example, the Mayo EM blog, the one that is the social media arm of our department, it was vetted by the Social Media Center.
Right. It's hosted on our platform, right?
Correct. It has oversight. Of course, you can publish as an individual person some content, but like any other individual endeavor when you're an academician, you may be something personally, but you're still an academician under an academic center. So you need to be very careful about that. So that reason, because you need to have a consistent professional persona in social media. So,
yeah, I just say we really encourage all of our physicians. We would encourage any of our physicians to be involved in Twitter and LinkedIn and in these other platforms on their own, representing themselves. And we do have guidelines and training to help them with that. If they want to have something that says Mayo Clinic Emergency Medicine blog, we need to be involved in it, because then the organization is represented. So I think that's the good balance that we have there.
Absolutely.
So, I want to see if there's some others here. I mean, I know there were some others.
Great questions, by the way.
Yeah, these are really good. I'm gonna. Somebody also just commending you for your good exclamation of altmetric with a capital A versus all metrics with the lowercase. So that was good.
Confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it can be, definitely. So I think we are, so somebody else, has Mayo Clinic published its metrics framework online so that other institutions can leverage them as a baseline?
Great question too. So the paper that we published has a generic, has a generic impact grid. And if you look into the paper, basically it says if you're the editor of a very important website, it should be very impactful. If you have a YouTube channel that has like more, this is a generic, so it's just a made up number, more than 100,000 visits per day is very impactful. And the other way around, if you have a blog post that have like a few thousand views per year, or you publish like a YouTube video that have a few thousand views per year, it's probably low impact. But that's a generic guideline. And the reason because we did a generic guideline, basically, just made up numbers, is because, as I said at the beginning, what is impactful for a Mayo Clinic physician that wants to progress from associate professor to professor is not the same that assistant professor or an instructor who wants to progress to the next level in a smaller academic center. And it's not the same that you can ask, for example, a famous cardiologist who publishes about cardiology to somebody who is a really, really, really niche field, like a parasitologist who is only concerned about one molecule and some strange parasite. That's very important. But you can't expect that this very niche parasitologist will have the same worldwide impact that this Mayo cardiologist who may speak about general cardiology.
Right. Okay. So a related question to this, has anyone actually been promoted at Mayo yet with these criteria?
I don't think so.
Okay. So you're hoping for it.
I'm
right?
hoping.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. So, but the fact that you've got the framework established, I think
the framework is
really
probably
important.
just a few months old.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Okay. I think we're getting there toward, I think as I've scoped this out, I think we've covered the questions that have been asked, but you will be ready to reply in the comments as other people add things. This will be archived. So this is open access webinar too, so available to anybody. So we'd encourage those of you who've watched this to share this in your circles as well. I don't know if we'll get an alt metric on it or anything like that.
We can try to figure out something.
We'll figure out something, but we do want to help spread the word about this, and we hope it's been useful and helpful. So please plan to join us for next month's webinar. It's going to be on podcasting. Also, our Our annual conference of the Mayo Clinic Social Media Network is in Scottsdale, Arizona, December 11th and 12th. We have a course called Social Media Residency, which is a one-day crash course on developing your own strategic plan. So identifying what that niche is and figuring out how you're going to concretely and specifically use social media to accomplish something relevant to your work. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. Details are probably above somewhere in the site here. Check that out. Thanks for being with us today. Again, please do share this in your circles and join us next time.
Thanks,
you, Dr. Cabrera.
Thank you.